Speaker.
Call Brett Hudson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise and speak on this, the third reading of the Statutes Amendment Bill number 4. As I've said, as a first-term MP, nearly every day is a day of firsts. And this is the point where we reach the third reading of the Statutes Amendment Bill, or a type of bill that I've not had to speak on before, sir. One thing that has become apparent, if I might just say, in the role of a new Member of Parliament is simply the volume and variation of the work to deal with. Now, this is a great thing. The fact that we deal on so many things of import to our communities, to society as a whole, and I refer here to our work both inside this House and outside, Mr Speaker, it is a great thing. And in fact, the work is so enjoyable, I would make the comment, sir, that at times it is very difficult to think of it as a work. But with the volume and variations of things that we do have to deal with, it is helpful. It is helpful, sir, to have as an aide-memoire to remind us of the work at hand at this moment. And I do apologise for my French pronunciation, sir. It is only marginally better than my English. Unfortunately, my sign language is very limited, but it is at least succinct. So, as an aide-memoire, Mr Speaker, I would just like to remind us all that this bill started as an omnibus bill. An omnibus bill is a bill that contains changes across many acts, changes that are generally quite technical in nature and are non-controversial, but are not matters of policy, but matters of small change. And I'm sure that reminder serves us both well, Mr Speaker. Now, I made some inquiries, as this is in fact the first omnibus bill that I have had to speak on. I made some inquiries, Mr Speaker, about what is the nature of an omnibus. And surprisingly, I couldn't find any references from the likes of great political luminaries such as Winston Churchill. So I thought I would consult a very sagely, world-renowned and estimable man of knowledge in these areas. So, sir, I looked to see what Reg Varney had to say on these matters. I couldn't find a direct quote from Mr Varney, but given that one of the dictionary definitions of omnibus is bus, and his very direct experience with such, it would be fair comment to suggest that he might describe an omnibus as a vehicle that takes you where you need to go, a large vehicle that takes you where you need to go. And that is just what the Statutes Amendment Bill represents, sir. It is amending provisions across 34 acts. It is making small and non-controversial yet important changes, important to ensure that our laws are working effectively and as we intended. It's getting us, sir, to where we need to go. And in that, I might make comments, sir, on a few of the very important changes that are being made. I'd also like to take this opportunity to correct a little misunderstanding we had in the Committee of the Whole stage. It was postulated, sir, that the changes under this omnibus bill were in fact prohibiting the introduction of Labour caucus members to Antarctica. Labour caucus members, Mr Speaker, and other native invertebrates. As it transpires, sir, that is not what the Act is doing. The Act in reference there was about harming native invertebrates to Antarctica. That is not what this bill does, sir. This bill makes changes to apply the same protections as currently are in force to native flora and fauna in Antarctica. Now, they may be gentle wee flowers on the other side of the House, Mr Speaker, but they're not native to Antarctica. Now, the other area that was canvassed quite considerably over the debates on this bill, sir, was the Births, Deaths, Marriage and Relationships Act 1995. Because, of course, the potential as the provisions exist here is that a person can change the name of another person because they don't have to prove their identity when making said change. So, sir, it is quite possible that, what could we envisage? Well, someone could indeed change the name of the current Labour leader to something like the Kingston Flyer without his permission and without any check on their legal right to do so, sir, under the current provisions. Probably something they might do just before they sent him packing down the line from the Labour leadership, which history shows us is quite a regular occurrence in recent times. It's also shown us that it's quite common, sir, that such people find themselves, sir, in New York at the United Nations, or what's otherwise known as the last train to Clarksville. Sir, the other amendments that are made in this bill include some very, very serious and simple but important changes. To the Local Government Act 1974, we're making a change that when we deal with temporary road closures, a change that will ensure that in fact they're dealing with the right agency. The right agency for consultation around local road closures is the New Zealand Transport Authority agency, not the Ministry of Transport, as is currently in the provision. So if we were to operate according to the law, we'd actually, or people, the local bodies, would be consulting with the wrong agency, sir. And as you could imagine, if the law was taken very literally, it would make what is already a troublesome, burdensome job, sir, all that much harder. But there are some very sound, pragmatic and sensible things that are being done to help our government agencies operate more efficiently and more effectively. The Copyright Act changes, or 1994 Copyright Act changes, sir, a good example of that. Basically, the change there is permitting the tribunal to sit with as many as 5, and it currently sits with a maximum of 5, but as few as 2 members, sir. Thus meaning that, because as a member opposite pointed out in one of the other stages, that because of the incredibly sound law that this government has enacted around what is commonly referred to as the 3 strikes legislation, or even sometimes a little unkindly as Skynet. But because of the implications of that law as passed, fewer illegal downloads, that the Copyright Tribunal has less workload now, sir, than it has had in the past. So a law change that actually permits them to go about their business with a better sized tribunal than was legally stipulated at a full number of 5 is simply common sense, Mr. Speaker. It is a good change. It is a practical and pragmatic change and helps to ensure that we are delivering better public services. Another matter of some interest, and was mentioned by a member opposite, is the National Animal Identification and Tracing Act 2012. Now, it has been identified, sir, that it might be a good idea for NATE, as it is also referred to in the legislation as NATE, for NATE to contract out some of the tasks that it does around compliance and the likes. The change we're making, sir, just ensures that it is very clear to all that the responsibility and accountability for such outsourced activities will remain with NATE, which makes complete sense, I think, to anyone who might envisage what the Act should have been, and is clearly changing it to something that makes greater sense. Now, one in particular, sir, that has stuck out for me since the first time I spoke on this bill, which was in fact the second reading, it relates to Information Act requests, both the Local Government Official Information and Meeting Act 1987, but also the Official Information Act 1982, sir. One change, the same change we're making across both, relates to what happens when a request is amended or split into separate parts. And as the law stands today, sir, those local authorities or a government agency can take the opportunity there to reset the requests as individual requests back to the start of the allowable timeframe of 20 days. Now, sir, that means there is the scope there for such bodies to deliberately slow down a process, particularly in acts that are used quite frequently by members of the public and interested groups, sir. So what this change is doing is it is reinforcing that, yes, each change does mean that for that amended part or for that new request, there is a 20-day time frame. But, sir, and this is very, very important, that 20-day limit will only be applied if the local authority or agency can show that it has made demonstrable effort within 7 working days of the original request to make some meaningful progress on that request. What that means, sir, is if they've been stonewalling, to use a term that many of the public might consider, if they've been stonewalling such requests and then to seek a further extension, they then look to break it up into subsequent parts, that they won't receive that allowance of a further 20 working days. That places some certainty and some favouritism, sir, if I can use that word, back on the part of the requester. And that is a very, very sound measure. Overall, Mr Speaker, I think that this bill, this omnibus bill, these 34 acts we're amending, make very good sense. They are a sensible thing to endorse, and I commend the bill to the House, sir.
Order. Just to remind the House that thanks to the contributions from previous speakers, we do know that this is a Statutes Amendment Bill. It amends 34 pieces of legislation. They are non-controversial. It is an omnibus bill. We now know what an omnibus does, and we've had a helpful quote from Reg Varley. And it'll be most appreciated by the Chair and others in the House and by those listening if people speak to the provisions of the bill. Thank you. I call Eugene.